Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today's another one of our Sunday conversation videos, and this one hopefully will be short and to the point, but it's about a fairly serious topic. It's about how to play board games when you're depressed. And honestly, it's not as much about how to play board games, but for me, board games are a venue through that darkness, right? I've been pretty open and honest on this channel about my history with mental health, my history with depression, my history and my journey through tons of different areas of life. And I'm doing well overall, but every now and then, exhaustion, burnout, depression, other mental health challenges kind of catch up with you. And I know I'm not alone in this. Over the past couple of years, we've all had a fairly hard time. So I figured I'd do a quick little video, a conversation video, talking with you about the strategies that I've developed in order to work my way through some elements of that downtroddenness. And I'm not the best at listening to these. And in fact, this video is in part a conversation to me to help me get more prepared for the next time that I'm having a bad day, or the next time that stress and anxiety overwhelms me and I can't see my way through it. Because that happens, especially over this season. I mean, this is a joyous, amazing season full of holidays and light and cheer, and at the same time, the statistics tell us that more people are suffering through emotional and mental and physical distress during this time period than throughout most of the spring, summer, or fall. And there's a few core reasons for that. I mean, first off, you don't have as much sunlight now, and you don't get out as much, especially if you live in a cold climate like Cleveland, Ohio. I haven't left the house in about a week, which seems like a lot, but it's snowing outside. Who wants to go for a walk in the snow? And yes, I know my dog does, but she's figuring it out on her own. Or open the back door crack and send her out running. It's a hard season. Memories of people who aren't there with you anymore, like my mother, kind of echo through this joyous time, because those things all combine for what this season represents. The lack of sunlight, the lack of exercise, the lack of just general time awake, daylight savings time shifting, and the days becoming more and more condensed, right? There's a chance you could, if you have a night cycle like me, wake up in darkness, go to sleep in darkness. I remember back when I lived in Washington, D.C., I physically felt strange leaving my apartment after spending about a week where all I saw was night. That's hard. That works on you. So, let's have a conversation about this. 5 tips and tricks to playing board games when you're depressed. It's a conversation I think more people in every industry should be having. It's a conversation that's important. Now, for those of you that know what depression feels like, I don't need to describe it for you, but for those of you that don't, let me give you just a little bit of a context. Depression for me is, if you've ever blacked out before, you get these black kind of circular vines or shadows echoing on the edge of your eyes, right? Depression for me feels like that. Everything in the world around me closes in till all I can focus on is whatever negative trait or whatever anxiety, whatever thing that I am ruminating on that is causing me to sink deeper and deeper until it's all that I can see ahead of me. And I have repetitive thoughts. I have the same challenges and the same struggles and the same concepts continue circling through my brain until I can physically feel and see that darkness closing in around the outside of my eyes. And that's when I know I'm there. And I could take steps to either pull myself up and out, or I could just lean back and let it sink. And in some ways, leaning back and letting it sink in, letting the darkness enclose you, is both the easiest and the most comforting path forward. Sure, if the world is horrible and if people hate you and if, your friends are disappointed and if you've really just gone and messed things up this time, why should you put the energy in to pull back out? It's much more comforting to relax. It's much more comforting to sink back into that depression, into that darkness, into that soft bed, and stay there for 18 hours. And so the mental anguish and the mental exhaustion and the mental manifestations of depression echo through to the physical realm. And what you see on your end is someone who doesn't smile as much, laugh as much, who seems exhausted, who sleeps too much, who's listening to sad or music that's reminding them of the depression they're currently in. And sometimes those people can put on a really good show when they're not around you, or when they are around you. And then it all falls apart when they're not, right? But that hour, or that 30 minutes, or that 5 minutes of interaction with you takes all of the energy they have in order to chat with you, in order to smile, in order to pretend like everything is good, and they go back home and everything isn't good. That's what depression feels like. It is exhausting. It takes all of the energy you have and it leaves you with almost no ability to get out of it. And then if you've been through it for long enough, if you've dealt with it for enough time, you'll realize that you also, while you're depressed, know the way through it. And yet it's incredibly hard to act upon those steps. Exercise, sunlight, daylight, friends, asking forgiveness or clarifying whatever dispute you had. Removing the anxiety by taking step-by-step problems and trying to work your way through them. Movement through things that you enjoy seeing and interacting with the world around you. All these things are the things that pull you out. And as you lean back and lay back into it, you don't want to do any of them. Again, it's almost more comforting. It's almost the easiest option to stay. And if the world's bad anyway, why is it worth pursuing? But we all know when we're not depressed, when we're feeling good, when life is happy, the amount of joy and pleasure and beauty there is to experience and friendships you get to enjoy and endure, that is worth every bit of pursuit you can give it. So let's talk about these 5 tips. Let's talk about these 5 tips and tricks to playing board games when you're depressed. And why does that matter? Well, it's because we're a board game channel, right? We're talking to people who love board games. So when you're feeling good, when you're excited, when you're playing through a campaign, is there anything better than sitting around a table and playing a tabletop game? Laughing and joking and working cooperatively to overcome some boss, going through a major campaign, or using your mind to solve whatever puzzle is in front of you in a classic Euro game and destroying people with sheer victory point dominance. Is there anything better than that? Whatever game you like, think about your favorite game and some of the best moments and the best experiences you've had with that, and ask yourself, is what I just described, is depression, whatever way I feel it or whatever way you feel it, is it worth trading that moment? For me, it's not. For me, I would never give up those moments that I've been able to have through board games. So, 5 tips and tricks to play board games when you're depressed. Because I genuinely think for those of you who love board games and also struggle with some mental health like I do, this is one of those areas that we can find a pathway through. So, first off, be prepared. Part of overcoming and dealing with your mental health problems has to do with being prepared going into them. You have to understand how you react to certain situations, where your weak points are, where your triggers are, and you need to be prepared to react to those things when you're in the midst of them. Because if you don't have those guardrails in place, if you don't have those fences in place, you'll find that it's almost impossible for you to take action when it's hard to do so. So now when it's easy to do so, start setting those things up. You should prepare 1 game or 2. And that means you know the rules. That means you're ready to play it the moment anyone asks. That means when you need to sit down and play something, you need that escape, you need that physical interaction, you have a game ready to go. A game that you love, a game that you enjoy, a game that maybe you put on the shelf for moments when you know you're feeling not your best. Something that's just easy to table and a riot to play, but you won't have to double check the rule book when you sit down. And if that means you schedule once a week where you sit down and you read through these rule books, where you learn the game and continue remembering and continue learning the game so at the moment you need it, the moment it's on hand, you can grab it and get it to the table, then that's what you have to do. This is a purposeful, a dedicated, a set-apart game or set of games that you're ready to play when you need them. This isn't the game that you pull out every single time friends are over. This isn't a game that you happen to like but don't always double check. This is a purposeful action on your part to be prepared for the moments when you're surrounded by grief. Number 2, make the process easy. That means the game that you pick shouldn't be something that's overwhelming. Because when you're weak and when you don't have the energy to actually go through the process of setting up a game like Frosthaven, it doesn't matter if I know all the rules to it. I'm never going to get this to the table when I'm so weak and so exhausted and so burnt out. Instead, I need to find and pick a game that either has a space in my home, like a tabletop game. Like if I was living by myself, I might honestly set up a campaign game that's just built always, permanently, and then it's easy for me to come by and play. But also think about the complexity of the game, think about how long it takes to play, think about how big of a barrier it feels like it needs to be to play. And honestly, some of the app-based games, like Chronicles of Crime or Destinies, would be good examples of games that make it as easy as possible for you to get them to the table because they hold your hand through that journey and they kind of play along with you. So think through that. Make it easy to play. Make it easy to set up. Make it easy to be accessible. That means don't hide it in a cupboard. Leave it on a bookshelf. That means don't have it be messy when you put it back away. Instead, have it be stored neatly so that you can pull it off the table as fast as possible. Have a dedicated space where you're going to plan to play games. You're going to set it up. All of that removes the barriers to entry. Number 3, and this one might be a hard one, but this one is probably one of the most important ones. Turn off electronics. I don't think social media or electronics help you war your way through depression at all. I don't think they help you war your way through almost any mental health situation. Yes, they can connect you to people, but I don't personally find that they provide a good escape. Instead, you get sucked into a rabbit hole of consumerism. You get sucked into spending habits based off anxiety. You get sucked into movies and TV shows based off of just not wanting to leave your bed. And all those things compound and continue feeding you this anxiety and this information that just boils in. I know myself personally. I have no social media on my cell phone. I have no social media, I have no browsing on my cell phone. Because, for me, it's too big of a risk factor. It's too big of an area of weakness. It's too big of an area that will pull me down and lead me back to burnout and to depression and to mental health challenges. And so I've made the decision to remove that convenience. I still have a smartphone because on my end, it's really nice to have a high-quality camera. It's really nice to be able to text through WhatsApp and talk with people and get emails all in this one device. But if push came to shove, if it was a decision between having social media on this or having just a regular basic flip phone, not having this, I would still choose to go with a flip phone. I can have a camera, I can use my computer, I still have social media, clearly, I'm here, right? And I still check and respond to comments and engage with people on my computer, but I don't have it in my pocket all the time constantly, because for me that's too much. But for you, when you're in the midst of a dark cycle, when you're in the midst of depression, try this. Turn off all your electronics. The video games, the TV, the computer. Now I know I said consider playing any of those app-based games. That does take an iPad, but I would even give a little bit of an exception to that as long as you're turning off the internet and you're not engaged with social media or whatever other things are happening there digitally. And if you're not able to do that, don't play the app-based games. Turn off your electronics. Get free from it for a couple hours at a minimum. Try this out. It'll help. Moving on to number 4, call a friend. This is another thing that probably needs some preparation and another thing that requires you to have close personal friends that are able or willing to come by, that understand what you're going through. And this is very hard. I don't know that I would even be entirely able to do it, especially when I'm at my worst. But if you are able to, have that conversation with a close friend or 2 close friends around you. They probably already know that you struggle with mental health. They probably already know that sometimes you're not your best or you're not yourself. Whether it's a partner or a spouse or a best friend or a relationship, reach out to them and say, hey, I'm usually pretty good and I'm getting better at managing my depression, but every now and then my anxiety takes over. Every now and then my depression clouds my vision and I can only see one pathway forward. And I've written this list and you're on this list. I'm supposed to call you to come play a game. And not anything else. We don't need to talk about my drama. We don't need to dig into stuff. I'm just calling you to have fun with me and then let me be. You don't need to solve my problems, but I do need someone to show up and hang out. If you're like me, I thrive off of people around me. A lot of my energy comes from being able to host and share and enjoy things with people. This is also a big essential part. Now, if you're a little bit more of an introvert, this might not be as crucial. alone time, a solo game, a book. That might be more important than bringing people together to play games, but I think a lot of us who enjoy playing board games also have some degree of social necessity. It's one of the reasons why we're attracted to this hobby, because you sit around a table and because you enjoy the company of people around you. So, call a friend. Have a friend prepared. And when you are in a week where you're struggling, when you have a hard week, which is sometimes your body just telling you that stuff is difficult, right? You lose a loved one and you're not quite sure how to process that grief, or you are processing that grief and you're just in the middle of it at the moment. You have a fight with a spouse or a friend or a sibling and it leaves you feeling anxious. You don't do a good job at work and suddenly your anxiety spikes and you can't find your way through it, or just the tendrils of depression, the stuff that's always existed kind of crawls back to the back of your mind and you're thinking through the history that you have and you're thinking through everything negative that's ever happened and you forget how to pull yourself out. You need a friend then. So, have a friend who likes board games, who knows board games, and have them on dial. It doesn't mean they have to come over immediately, but just have a code word or a text and say, hey, I'm having a hard week. I'd really love to play a game this Wednesday. And if they're available, hopefully they'll show up. And then number 5, if everything else fails, here's the ripcord you can pull. You've already learned the game. You've prepared it for when you're in a bad state. You've made the process easy. It's a game that can get to the table as quickly as possible. You've turned off your electronics. Do it. Trust me. Promise me. You've called a friend. And maybe they're coming in a day or two, or maybe they're just not available. They also have a life that they have to live. What is the final stage? What is the ripcord that you have to pull? Leave your electronics off. Set the game up to whatever degree you're able and willing to do. And then go on a walk. Get outside. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. I don't care if you're pacing in your room. I do care a little bit if you're pacing in your room. That's not healthy. But I don't care if it's 2 a.m. I don't care if it's the middle of the afternoon. I don't care if you have to drive to a gym or a track or leave the city or go to a park. Whatever you have to do, you're going to leave the environment you're currently in and you're going to go for a walk. Until, and this is the key point because this is all about playing board games, until playing board games sounds or feels like a relief from whatever it is you're currently doing, right? Just go walk until you're bored, until you're sore, until you're tired, until you feel better, until you're freezing flipping cold, and you're now willing to go back inside and immediately start playing the game or working towards it. And do not let yourself get distracted. And if you get distracted, go back through this process. Do you have a game on standby? Is it easy to set up? Have you phoned a friend? Have you turned off your electronics? And if so, once again, go on a walk until the walk hurts, until you're ready to come back and sit down and play a board game. So, that's my process. That's my diagnosis. That's my analysis of how you play board games when you're depressed. And honestly, I have a few of these on this list that I should really work on more. I'm not the best at this, but I at least, when I'm in the middle of it, know what needs to be done in order to pull myself out of it, and I know that these steps will help. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for having a conversation with me. Let me know what other tips and tricks you've experienced. Let me know if you're willing to share what your relationship with mental health is. I don't need gruesome stories. I don't need personal stories, but I do think sometimes it helps to share, and we'll be there reading comments and responding and just engaging in a conversation like we try to do every Sunday. Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. Get out and play a game. There's a reason that's our tagline. It's the whole point of this show. We'll see you next time.